Episode number 123, Multifamily Financials, T12, Above and Below the Line Expenses, and Expense Ratio. This is 39.6 Facebook and YouTube Live Finance Show. This is the show that teaches high earners like yourselves how to make your money work for you so you don't have to work for your money. We talk general investing, taxes, real estate, syndications, Airbnb, paying for childcare, paying for college, and even the car you drive. Today, we are going to continue our discussion of multifamily financials in real estate investing. All right, there we go. Sorry, I just lost my light. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. My light actually fell to the floor. All right, I think this is my first 2-day break in the past 3 months. A lot of stuff happened this past week. Some big stuff in the news. I'm not going to go into much details, but you might be hearing about 39.6 a lot more in the near future. All right, we got a handful of people in here. If you are watching and you are able to hear me, please let me know. If you can see the split screen, please let me know, and let me know where you're watching from, like what part of the country or the world if you're not in the United States. All right, so with no further ado, we're gonna crack into some more of the nitty-gritty maths here. Okay, now I've already kind of gone over a lot of the basic stuff, cash on cash return, net operating income. This spreadsheet I have right here is basically identical to a different spreadsheet I've already gone through. So just to kind of incrementally cover more and more topics, I'm going to first start with what we've already covered and then go forward and discuss more. Okay. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. I think, it's using the other camera. I guess I can't switch that right now. Okay. So the top line here, November 2019, we're going to purchase a property, a $20 million multifamily property. Okay, this could be like 200 doors. We're going to pay 80%, buy it with 20% down and 80% leverage, 80% loan to cost. That gives us a down payment of $4 million and a loan amount of $16 million for a total amount of invested cash of $4 million. Okay. So I'm just going to hide that because that's going to be as relevant to most of the information until we look at selling the property. Rental income here will be $120,000 per month. So this is the amount that it was in November 2019. Let's say that was the year we purchased the month we purchased the property. And then $10,000 of other income. Again, that covers other things like parking, laundry, storage units, valet trash, etc., for a total revenue of $130,000. Okay, now I'm going to hide that. Now we have expenses. I clarify this as calling these expenses that are above the line. This black line over here is the line, okay, in line 34. So any expense above this is considered an above the line expense. Now, that includes payroll, general administrative, property management, marketing, retention, repairs and maintenance, contract services, make-readies, utilities, insurance, real estate taxes. So all combined here is $65,000 of operating expenses. These are expenses that are of the asset itself, not of the investment, but of the asset. So if somebody were to buy this, they would have potentially the same expenses. These are the operating expenses of the asset. We have $65,000 of expenses, and we have $130,000 of total revenue. So you subtract the total expenses, and you end up with $65,000 of net operating income. Now, the expense ratio is the percentage of the income that is used up covering these operational expenses. So in this situation, it's 50%. But let's pretend it was $32,500 of expenses. Well, then that would only be 1/4 of the total revenue. So the expense ratio would be 25%. Okay, so it's the percentage of the income that is going directly toward paying the asset expenses. All right, so our net operating income here is $65,000. Then we have the line. We have expenses that are below the line, and these are expenses that are outside of the asset itself. So like if somebody else were to buy the property, they might have different expenses completely because, for example, they might not buy it with a mortgage. In this situation, we're paying $40,000 a month for the interest-only mortgage of 3%. That gives us a debt service coverage ratio of 1.63. That's the $65,000 NOI divided by 40,000. Okay, and we covered that a couple episodes ago. Now, in a syndicated asset where there's a group of investors, there's usually an asset management fee for the sponsor to do the work of managing the asset. It's usually like 1.5%. It can depend on the size of the asset. The bigger the asset, it might be a smaller percentage. Okay, so, but that is not an expense to the asset itself. It's a cost to the investment, which is different. Okay, because somebody who owns the asset directly wouldn't necessarily be paying an asset management fee. Then you have capital expenditures. These are the expenses that you want to put money into the asset to drive its value up by improving it. Again, now somebody else who owns the asset might not want to make those improvements. So these are expenses that are above and beyond the operational day-to-day expenses or month-to-month or year-to-year expenses. These are things that are going into it to improve it. Okay. And so you add up all of these expenses, $40,000, $2,000, $10,000, you get $52,000. So those are the expenses that are below the line. We have $65,000 of net operating income, and we have $52,000 of expenses below the line. So that gives us a net cash flow of $13,050. Now, if we weren't putting all that money into CapEx, we would have $23,000. But we are spending some extra money every month from our profit and investing that money into the property. So for example, every month you could be taking $10,000 and then turning a unit with a basically old trim and updating that to a nice unit. Okay. And you could just take that from your monthly cash flow. So you don't need to have extra cash at the outset invested into this in order to do all the make-readies or all the rehabs. You could just do it month by month with your extra cash flow. Okay. Now, market cap rate is something we already discussed in this previous episode, episode 122. And in this situation, it was 3.9%. because it had a net operating income of $65,000 per month, which is times 12 is 65,000. 60 times 12 is going to be 72,000 plus 5,000. So 720 plus 60, so $780,000 over the course of a year. And the selling price was 20 million, which gave it a market cap rate of just about 4%. So if we were to sell it in the same exact month we bought it and the market cap rates are the same, it would be sold at no profit. Okay. So that's just 1 month. Now we are going to expand this, and I'm going to include all of the other months. So we're going to look at, and now I can't see all of it here. So there we go. November 2019 through October 2020. Now this is what we would call a trailing 12. Okay. So a trailing 12 is going to include all of the last 12 months profit and loss statement. Okay, so November 2019, December 2019, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Okay, so right now it is November 2020. So if we had the financials already done from October 2020, this is what it would look like for the trailing 12 months. Okay, and in this example, I made it really simple. What I did was I just took every single amount and I just made that the same for every single month beginning to the end, as if there are absolutely no changes. November all the way through September, through October, no changes. So everything is exactly the same. Okay, and then we have at the end, if I unhide that column, we have the total, okay? And in this total, we're gonna get the trailing 12, okay? So as I had mentioned earlier, you end up with a total of $780,000. There's a typo there. $780,000 of net operating income over the past 12 months. If you look at the top rows, you have your income, total revenue, $130,000 times 12 months gives you $1.56 million of total revenue over the course of the past year. $780,000 of expenses leaves you $780,500 of net operating income. Okay, and your expense ratio here is going to be 50%. Sorry, there's one typo there. So it's exactly 50%. Okay, 1.56 million and 780,000. Because everything is exactly the same from beginning to the end, and if we assume that the market cap rate is exactly the same as it was before, that is the same 3.9%. I'm going to say 3.90% here, and I have to change that to percentage. There you go. If we assume that the market has not changed, then the value will be exactly the same. Now, if over the course of the year, the cap rate goes down to 3.5%, then you end up increasing the value of the asset, okay, in comparison to before. You'll end up with $22 million of value as opposed to the $20 million that you bought it for. So you end up with a $2.2 million profit. Okay, we discussed that in the previous episode. I'm going to leave this back at 3.90% and show you what happens though, however, when you actually change the numbers, because you're not going to have number exactly the same throughout the entire year. For example, let's pretend in the spring you get your assessment for property tax. So real estate taxes over here. And real estate taxes were previously $300,000. So you had accrued $25,000 as an expense per month. And then you get to the springtime and you protest your property tax. And you're able to get them down from $300,000 to, let's just say, $280,000. So in the subsequent months, you don't need to save as much money or accrue as much. You can decrease the amount you're accruing by $5,000 per month and change this to $20,000 for the rest of the year. And so now you're down to $280,000 of real estate tax over the past 12. Okay, and what happens is you end up having $20,000 less in your total above the line expenses. So you've decreased the expenses of the asset. So it is now more profitable. Okay, so just doing that alone, you have actually improved the NOI. The expense ratio here is, okay, so we've increased the value because now it's $20,512,000. Okay, and the only thing we changed here is the amount of real estate tax. And in doing that, the total expenses went down to $60,000 and your NOI went up to $70,000. Okay, and your expense ratio should be now actually, sorry about that, that is inverted. So the expense ratio is going to be equals your total expenses divided by your total revenue. It should have gone down. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna drag that across and you can see here, okay, it went down to 46% instead of going up to 54%. So the expense ratio improves and that increases your profitability and increases the value of the asset. Something else you can do is if you're able to, let's pretend you increase the other income and let's pretend you're gonna start charging people for valet trash, and that is going to generate, you're going to onboard people gradually, like as you have new tenants. Let's just pretend you do it that way and you increase the other income, let's just say by $200 a month. Okay, it's not that much. Equals this plus $200. All right, and then every month you're going to continue to increase that. So at the end of the year, you've increased the other income from $10,000 up to $12,200. This used to be $120,000, but now it's $133,000. So you've had a $13,000 increase in income. And in doing that, because this is a multiplier of about 25, you've bumped up the value of the asset by a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, now let's pretend you're able to drive the rents up on the actual properties, or let's pretend you're able to increase the occupancy. So if the occupancy was 90% and now it's like 91%, if you're just able to bring up one more unit and each unit is, let's pretend $2,000 a month, okay? Then you get that plus $2,000. Okay, so if you just do that and keep that the same the rest of the year, that helps. But let's pretend you're able to continue bumping up the rent over the course of the year. And let's just do it by $1,000 a month to make it a little bit simpler, because $2,000 per month will be a lot to increase a property. Okay, so that would be a combination of decreasing vacancy, but also just propping up the rents on tenants as they renew. So you do that, it goes up $1,000 per month. So you go from $120,000 up to $131,000, and now you're up to $1.5 million. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger on your screen. There you go. Okay. So you have about $1.5 million, and now you have $1.6 million of income. If you look here at the expense ratio, it starts at 50%, but it goes down to 40%, which means it's getting more and more and more profitable. Okay, the NOI is increasing from 65,000 all the way up to 83,000. That's a sizable jump. You're taking 65,000 to 83,000 per month. That's an additional $18,000 per month of revenue. Now that property tax actually, it goes down 5,000 a month over here, but it's going to kind of reset itself to a new steady state of like $23,000 a month. Okay, so it's a little bit artificial when you look at just individual months. That's why the T12 is really kind of the gold standard, because you're going through an entire year. And because a lot of expenses are per year, it really captures that expense in total across the entire 12 months. Okay, and the way the financials work, people can basically put expenses in different locations, and it can make some months look better or worse. When you do a trailing 12, it's a little bit more difficult to fake the books, okay, or make it look the way you want it to look. Now, here, the net operating income is up to $877,000, okay? So you've brought that up substantially, and now, using the same market cap rate of 3.9%, the value of the property is $22,503,590. That's an increase of the value of $2.5 million in 1 year by increasing rent by $1,000 a month, other income by $200 a month, and just decreasing your expenses by $20,000 over the course of the entire year. Okay, so a trailing 12 looks at all 12 of those months. You can see the all the different line items. Okay. Again, as a review, the expense ratio is your net operating income divided by your expenses above the line divided by your total revenue. Okay. Your above the line expenses are those to the asset. Your below the line expenses are those outside the asset that are kind of optional, discretionary expenses that not everybody would be using, like capital expenditures or asset management fee, or even just having a mortgage. And then lastly, okay, I'm going to do another column here. I'm going to call it the trailing three. Okay. So a trailing three would be the sum of the last 3 months. Okay. But you can take those numbers and you can see that those numbers can be artificially quite high because it's just the last 3 months of the year. In terms of the total revenue in those last 3 months is a lot higher than it is the first 3 months, and the expenses are lower as well. Okay, so it's a little bit artificial, but if you're using a trailing three, you can look at those last 3 months and then you can annualize it. Okay, so an annualized T3 would be taking those numbers times 4. Okay, because you're taking 3 months times 4 months, and that gives you 12 months worth of numbers. Okay, and so you can use that to come up with a new value of your property. So I'm going to take 3.9%, just like it was before. Okay, and you can see that my annualized T3 is 1.7 million of income, and my annualized T3 of expenses is $981,000. This is not right. 39. It should be lower. Okay, so it should be 39,000, and oh, that's because I added my I took my NOI. Oh, let's see. Oh, that's right. 722 versus 761. Okay, so that is smaller. Okay, so all of these numbers here are smaller. This number here is the net operating income. So I have to recalculate the net operating income. Okay, so net operating income equals the total revenue, 1.7 minus the expenses. So that's going to be at 981,000. I don't know why that's wrong, but that gives you a different number for a different valuation because you have higher revenue over here than you do when you look at the whole trailing 12. I don't know, my calculation's off, but that's how a trailing 12 a trailing 3 would work. Some people actually look at a trailing 1, just the last month, and estimate an annualized income and expense of just that one individual month to come up with a value. So because a year ago, you know, those numbers aren't necessarily quite as relevant like what the rent was 12 months ago, because now your rent is up to what it is now, and those people are on lease. So that's likely going to stay at least for a while. The expenses part, that be a little bit more variable because expenses are not every month like the way rent is. So you have to be a little bit more careful and really look at those T12s when you're making those estimates of a shorter period of time, like a T1 or a T3. Okay, and I have to figure out why that number does not seem right to me. The expenses should be lower. 80 is 245 times 4. Okay. Anyhow, that is it for today. Sorry, there's a couple mistakes in there, but I think it all came across and should make sense. So that's it for episode number 123. Until tomorrow, episode number 124. Just simply for my entertainment, hopefully yours. Until our next episode, this is not legal, professional accounting, or any other professional advice. Have a good night.